In this video, I don't want any likes or subscriptions from you. I just want you to watch it attentively when you're free, because I will talk about something important in the Hunter x Hunter community, and I want it to get the attention it deserves. I apologize for my selfishness in this request, but I hope you'll watch the video until the end because it's one of the best things I've written. There's no need to share it. YouTube's algorithms will do that. When the king was born, he was born with the philosophy of power in his mind. He never cared about his mother or his people. He woke up to find that he was the strongest creature in the world. For him, what distinguished a person as useful or useless was their possession of power. He saw himself at the top of the pyramid. Togashi confirmed this in the manga by saying that the being destined to stand atop all creatures, meaning the king saw himself as a ruler of the world since his birth. And since he was the strongest and only acknowledged power, the matter of taking the lives of others, as he did to that child and its parents, was not evil to him, but rather a right he believed he had. Then, when he seized the palace in Eastern Gorto, you saw the scene where Meruem killed the fake King Diego, the ruler of that country. After that, those girls begged Meruem to spare their lives, and his response was another question. If pigs begged you, would you spare them and not eat them? This is a reference, as we mentioned earlier, to the fact that he sees himself at the top of the food chain and considers himself the noblest creature in the world. Later, we learned that the king became bored. To kill this boredom, he brought the best chess, shogi, and other game players from Eastern Gorto. This means that he didn't bring the best players in the world in those games, but rather the best players available in Eastern Gorto. For example, if Magnus Carlsen were the best chess player in the world, he would bring Hikaru Nakamura, for instance, if he were in the United States. The important part is that the king defeated all those players from various intellectual sports, and as we saw, only one game remained for him. What makes this game special is that Eastern Gorto has the best players who have won the title 5 times in a row. This game is Gungi, and the person who would play against him is the best Gungi player in the world, Kumugi.
A young girl appears who will shape the fate of the king.
The king, against his previous opponents, needed only a few matches to defeat them, but for Kumugi, he needed many matches just to understand her style. While playing with her, the king had conflicting feelings and thoughts. As we mentioned, he sees himself at the top of the pyramid and believes he has the right to kill creatures, so why couldn't he defeat Kumugi? When the king saw Kumugi in her physically weak state and her silly facial expressions, he became frustrated and fell into a spiral of doubt. Because here, in this moment, his philosophy of I am the strongest, I am the noblest, didn't apply at all to Kumugi. Meruem saw himself being humiliated by a hideous child. When he played against others and won, he needed only a few matches to understand their style and even fewer to defeat them. But with Kumugi, after a whole day of playing, he couldn't even begin to grasp her style. On the second day, the king was finally able to understand Kumugi's style and began his plan to make a move against it, which was exactly what happened. In one of the rounds, he felt that he had finally understood the style and, for the first time, had the upper hand. He was about to attack Kumugi's king and win, but when he made his move, Kumugi saw it and started to think. Before, she would just play without thinking, but when she made her move, she completely turned the game around on the king. The king realized that she hadn't even needed to think. She had predicted his move, and it wasn't even a threat to her. Meruem was annoyed by this because it was an insult to him as a king. He asked her why she didn't play her move quickly, and why she was mocking him like this. And here comes the great story that made me applaud Togashi.
Or matches, or even in textbooks.
Kumugi says that the move the king played, or the plan Meruem devised to trap her king, is called Kokoriko. Remember this name well. This plan is one she invented 10 years ago, and it became a move that is now played and studied in Gungi books, which made Kumugi very happy. However, in one of Kumugi's international matches, her opponent used the Kokoriko move against her. In that match, she discovered a way to counter that move, and she defeated her opponent in the same way she had just defeated the king in this round. But because she found a defense against something she had invented in front of everyone's eyes, the Kokoriko move was never played again. It disappeared from Gungi books because now there was a defense against it. So when Kumugi saw the king play that move, having discovered it on his own, she compared the moment to her dead child coming back to life. That's why she hesitated to play the counter move. She didn't want to kill her child again. I personally remember that this story left a strong impression on me, and I believe most of you felt the same way. But what's coming next is even more shocking. After this match, the king was in a state of confusion. Throughout his matches with Kumugi, he was the one losing, the one who was the weaker side, the one who was being attacked. He thought to himself that usually such things would be an insult to him, and the fate of this was death. Meruem sees himself as something sacred and views other creatures as inferior to him. But for some reason, unknown to Meruem, despite all this, he enjoys these matches, even though his existence, which defines him as something sacred, is being trampled into the ground. At the same time, as someone who believes in power and enhanced genes, it annoys him that Kumugi, the blind, clumsy girl, possesses such skill in gungi. The next day, Meruem makes a cunning move to affect Kumugi's psychology and defeat her. He tells her that if he wins, he will take her left hand, but if she wins, he will grant her any wish she desires. Meruem did this to stress Kumugi and instill fear in her heart, hoping it would affect her play, but her answer made him regret the day he thought of using this approach. Kumugi tells him that instead of taking her left hand, could she bet what she always bets on in her matches? She wants to bet her life. Kumugi tells the king that, as a foolish blind girl born into a poor family of 12 members, she knows nothing but gungi, and gungi is the only means of support for her family. She decided that if she lost even a single match, she would end her life. At that moment, the king, who considered strength and the ability to crush anyone who opposed him as the foundation of his existence and philosophy of life, had his belief shaken a little. He saw in the foolish blind girl he was, playing against a different kind of strength, and for the first time, the king apologized to a creature inferior to him by cutting off his left hand. For the first time, he also saw himself as a loser, with a creature inferior to him surpassing him. All of this happened under the gaze of Poof, who sees the king as a sacred being and sees Kumugi as a new threat that endangers the king's philosophy of power. The matches between Kumugi and Meruem continue, and as usual, Kumugi always wins, and Meruem is completely unable to defeat her. The king begins to change, and his philosophy of strength starts to shift. Because Meruem began studying Kumugi and considering her a powerful creature despite her physical flaws, he asked her for her name as a sign of acknowledgement. She told him that her name was Kumugi. It was only natural for her to ask him for his name in return. And here, for another time, the king felt like the weaker side. How is it that I, the one who will rule the world, the one who believes only in power and destruction, which I truly see as my right and duty, do not have a name that distinguishes me, while all the creatures inferior to me have one? As a result, the king gathers all the royal guards and asks them for his name. Poof answers that he doesn't have a name and that he is just the king. They will soon kill all the other kings, and the name will remain reserved only for the king. But Meruem replies that as long as there are kings, they will eventually be gone, and the word king is just a title for a position, not a name specifically. You see how Kumugi started to affect him, how the supreme creature began to reshape his thinking and his plan. The king then asks P2 about what will happen to Kumugi if she is chosen in the human selection tomorrow. P2 responds that she will most likely die, as the selection aims to take the strongest and best humans genetically and turn them into chimera ants that serve the king. Meruem replies that after meeting Kumugi, he learned that strength can be displayed in different ways and in various things. Strength doesn't exactly mean the smartest or the most genetically powerful creatures. Everyone has their own power, a specific area where this power stands out. For example, Kumugi's strength is that she is a professional player. He continues, saying that on their way here they killed that child and her parents. He mentions that perhaps that child also had a special kind of strength. While Meruem was speaking, Poof thought to himself, wishing that the king wouldn't say this and wouldn't abandon the philosophy he was born with, and that he wouldn't see himself as the one who is wrong. Before Meruem could admit his mistake, that what he was born with wasn't correct, and that he still didn't understand anything about this world, he was filled with anger for being wrong. Due to his pride as a king above everyone else, he refused to admit it in the final second.
And violence is the ultimate force in the entire world.
He tries to forget everything he said and all the conclusions he came to after playing with Kumugi, and returns to his philosophy that he is the supreme being and he has the right to take any life he wants. He then heads to Kumugi's room with the intention to kill her. He describes her strength as a foolish power that revolves around a small board, while the king's strength is enough to change the world and start something new. As he opens the door to kill Kumugi, he is surprised to find a bird attacking her. so he saves her instead of killing her. One of the reasons for this is that this weak creature with a fragile body was being attacked and harmed without asking for help. When he asked her why, her simple answer was that it was too late and she didn't want to bother anyone, and this is also a kind of strength. Here, the king's entire philosophy collapses completely. What comes next due to these events is something unbelievable. Stay tuned with me. The hunters attacked the palace, and Zeno unleashed his dragon dive. He and Netero headed toward the king, and when they arrived, Pitou also arrived at the same time. They saw Meruem, and a dark aura emanated from him, because Zeno's attack had hit Kumugi. The narrator says that Zeno and Netero, who had come solely to kill the king, stood still in respect, as the greatest threat to humanity was gently and carefully holding the injured child. Meanwhile, Pitou, who had jumped all that distance to protect the king, froze in place as well upon seeing Meruem in that condition. When Meruem asked her to treat Kumugi, she started crying for the first time in her life. Many here give various reasons for why Pitou cried, but I believe the reason is that for the first time, she saw Meruem in a state of weakness and saw him care, filled with all those emotions. His request for Kumugi's treatment wasn't a command, but rather seemed like a friend asking for his friend's help. Zeno, who was about to attack, asked Netero to wait and respect the situation. He explained that if they did the opposite, they would be the Chimera ants, and the Chimera ants are the humans. Meruem told them that he agreed to fight them in a place far from the royal guards. The narrator says that Netero, who had paid millions to Zeno and made many plans to separate the royal guards from the king, felt that he had completely lost the initiative when the king asked them to fight in a distant place.
Yes, fine.
Kumugi is the driving force behind the Chimera Ant arc. She affected the king, Poof, Pitou, Netero, Gon, Killua, and Palm. Togashi, in this arc, surpassed himself because instead of being superficial in his writing and filling the arc with battles, he introduced this drama and simple philosophy. The battles were nothing more than complements to the arc. Gon enters with all his feelings of hatred, pain, and resentment towards Pitou, and he finds Pitou treating Kumugi. Of course, neither Killua nor Gon know that Pitou is treating her. They thought she was doing to her what she did to Kite. Meanwhile, Killua feels something strange, as Pitou didn't show any signs of hostility, but rather acted like a cat, protecting her child. Allow me to say something harsh, and I will understand if many here get upset with me, as my culture differs from theirs. The catgirl trope is something present in many anime, and this character is often portrayed in a sexualized and cringy way. Most writers depict her as something for teenagers to desire and use her as a tool for attraction. But Togashi is the only one who drew the catgirl character and didn't reduce her to a sexualized figure to please the failures. Back to the events, when Gon saw Pitou in that position, he asked her to leave Kumugi and fight him somewhere else. But Pitou begged him to wait so she could treat this human. Gon didn't understand anything here, and his anger rose little by little. He wondered why an evil being like Pitou would treat this little girl. One of the best scenes in the anime is Gon's anger. He strikes the ground and says that this is not fair. Why is it that the one who took Kite's life, who gave me that evil look, now seems to be surrendering and begging me to let her save the life of a little girl? At that moment, when Pitou began begging and broke her own arm just to make Gon believe her and let her continue the treatment, Gon exploded in rage at her. Gon here is a child who wanted revenge for his friend, but found himself as the villain. It's similar to what happened between Netero and Zeno earlier. Notice that at the beginning of the arc, the Chimera ants seemed like evil creatures, and we, as viewers, sided with the humans and the hunters. But after Kumugi, everything became completely different. You didn't know which side to lean towards anymore, and Togashi himself gave you the final blow when he said, "We are not like the ants. No, we are worse than them." The fight between Meruem and Netero ended, and the king returned with a stronger fusion and a new personality. However, at the same time, because he had partially lost his memory due to the explosion, he felt that something was missing, as if he was playing a role that didn't belong to him. He realized that his goal in this world was not to rule the world, but rather that there was something he wanted more than anything else, though he didn't know what it was. And of course, this thing is Kumugi, or playing with her. Here comes the greatest trial. The judge is Meruem, and the accused are Poof and Welfin. Poof is someone who holds the king in the highest reverence, while Welfin hates the king and sees Gyaro as his true king.
I become able to see into their heart.
After merging with Poof, Meruem's relationship with him became stronger. Meruem began to sense what Poof was feeling and hiding. What Poof was hiding was Kumugi, and the reason for this is that Poof believes that the king was created to rule the world, and that Kumugi is just someone who will make the king weaker and deviate him from his goal. Poof cannot lie to the king because, as I said, he sees him as something sacred, but at the same time, he doesn't want to tell him the truth because by doing so, he would weaken the king and harm him according to his belief. So when Meruem got angry at Poof and confronted him with the punishment that anyone who lies or deceives the king deserves death, since Poof believes this too and doesn't doubt the king's laws, he decided to let Meruem kill him rather than tell him about Kumugi. Can you grasp this beautiful contradiction? Can you understand this brilliance? Poof sees the king as something sacred that he cannot refuse any request from, but at the same time, if he tells him, it would mean that the king will deviate from his goal by knowing about Kumugi. When the king came to punish Poof, and because he had started to feel Poof's emotions due to the fusion, and knew that the reason Poof was hiding it was for his benefit, and that there was no hostility coming from Poof's aura, he couldn't hurt his guard. And here, at this moment, we switch to Welfen in the well-known scene where he aged 100 years. Due to the king's expressions and aura, every cell in his brain worked hard to remember the name of Kumugi and save his life. The king then recalled his memories of his partner in the game and how he understood the meaning of humanity through her. As the king left to search for Kumugi, Welfen shouted at the king boldly, saying that Gyaro was the only one who would call him king and that Meruem considered him an enemy. The king wished to find his friend Gyaro and urged him to live as a human if he found him. When Poof heard these words and the term human, he realized that the king had completely changed and that he had gone down an irreversible path. Meruem had become human.
Netero once believed that the king was wavering on the brink that lies between the human world and that of the ant.
Meruem enters the palace searching for Kumugi and then uses his ability to find Palm and ask her about Kumugi. He tells Palm that the ants have lost and humanity has won, and all he wants now is to meet Kumugi and play with her in his final hours. Palm realizes that the king is telling the truth and that he is dying with little time left. She tries to deny it due to her conflicting feelings of being human and a chimera ant. She tells the king, "Do you think I will believe you?" In her mind, she thinks it's impossible for such an absolute king to lie. She tells the king that he is a killer and will kill her, but in her mind, she believes that this is not true and the king is changing and only wants to see Kumugi. She struggles with herself and asks the king to torture or kill her in order to get what he wants. But Meruem tells her that something has changed within him, even if it's just slightly. He tells her that he has a little time left in this world and does not want to waste it searching for Kumugi, so he needs Palm's help. Poor Palm is completely confused. She knows he's telling the truth. She knows his time is up. She knows he is dying, but she finds it hard to accept. This is the same feeling Gon had with Pitu. How could someone they fought as an enemy of humanity, a source of evil, become like this? How did humans lose their humanity, and the ants became more human than them?
And as starkly beautiful as any.
What the strongest creature did was try to kneel to her, showing his good intentions, hoping she might believe him. But since Palm is now half chimera ant and half human, she couldn't bear it, and accepted Meruem's help on the condition that she would witness his final moments, and be the only one to bear witness to what happened.
I know what you mean to us as a...
Meruem tells Kumugi his name, which he learned from Netero, and they begin to play Gungi. During this match, Kumugi uses the Kokoriko move, which disturbs the king. As we mentioned before, this move has a counter defense and is no longer used, so he asks her if she is deliberately trying to lose. She replies that it is not the case, and that she has never joked when playing Gungi. They continue playing, and when the king uses the move that flips the board against the Kokoriko move, Kumugi plays a move that has never been played before in the history of Gungi. This move flips the situation against the counter defense to the Kokoriko plan. In other words, Kumugi invented the Kokoriko move, the counter defense to Kokoriko, and the defense against the counter defense to Kokoriko. And thus, the king loses again, and again, and again, and again. again and again. He tells Kumugi that he has been poisoned, and if she stays with him, the poison will transfer to her and she will die with him. But she responds that she feels like she was born for this moment, so she decides to die with him. The king also feels that he was born just to play with this human, and you all know the rest of the story. How Meruem lost his sight like Kumugi, and how Kumugi died while feeling the king's face to know what he looked like for the first time. Can you imagine that the Chimera Ant arc could have been without Kumugi, relying only on battles? It would have been impossible. It would have been a crime against the arc. If the arc was without Kumugi, it would have been all battles and conflicts with less drama. Introducing Kumugi, however, moved the king, moved Poof, moved Netero, moved Palm, and moved Killua. It moved many characters. You can imagine that the king's character would have been ordinary, or maybe even bad, if it weren't for Kumugi. The king would have been a hollow character who only recognized absolute power, wanting to destroy and rule as a typical villain. How would Gon have been if he found P2 just waiting for him like this, without Kumugi? One of the best scenes in the story is his anger as he sees the creature that killed his friend and tortured him, now treating an innocent child. The king's interaction with P2, Poof, Netero, and others would have been ordinary and probably bad if it weren't for Kumugi. Togashi, instead of giving you an evil character with a mysterious past like his other villains, gave you the best villain from beginning to end, showing how he transformed from someone who believed in power and authority to someone more human than humans themselves. All of this happened under your watch, dear viewer. There's no denying that Hunter x Hunter had great drama in the previous arcs, but in the Chimera Ant arc, the level of drama escalated in a terrifying way, and all of this was thanks to a blind girl. Togashi could have given you Meruem as a typical villain, like someone from Dragon Ball, just another ordinary villain who sees himself as the strongest and seeks world domination in a traditional way. The entire arc could have been filled with battles and attempts to defeat this villain, but Togashi gave you something a million times better than that. The summary is that this girl is a masterpiece, one who moved the entire arc and turned it into one of the most timeless narrative masterpieces that exist, in my opinion.